everyone, and welcome back to another video. My name is Jenna Van Mourik, and today I am so excited because I'm going to be talking to you guys about books I've read in the past year to year and a half-ish that were not biblical fiction. If you've been subscribed to this channel for any length of time, hello, welcome back, I'm glad you're here, then you'll know that I am obsessed with one thing, although I actually have a lot more interests than this one thing, but it's this one thing that I end up talking about on the internet the most, and that is biblical fiction or ancient historical Christian fiction novels that take place during biblical settings or events. I have spent pretty much my entire time blogging and book reviewing and writing and being a person on the internet talking about this very specific and slightly niche genre of Christian fiction and attempting to explain in more or less concise terms what that means. I have also written 2 biblical fiction novels myself, and you can find more information on those in the description box below or by visiting my website at www.authorjennavanmourik.com or at any of these other places listed here. But that is not what this video is about. This video is specifically all about Christian fiction books I've read that aren't biblical fiction, and this is over the course of the last year and a half-ish. Oh, wait, I just realized I forgot a couple. Let me add some more to my stack. I am currently facing my bookshelves right now, and most of the shelves are biblical fiction novels or biblical novels. But there is like a small section on like the very far corner that is for books that are not biblical fiction or just other genres of Christian fiction. And I thought I would share what I've read in the past year that is not related to biblical fiction at all, or maybe slightly, but it's completely different. Because here's the thing about me. I'm a writer, as I mentioned previously, and I write biblical novels, but when I am very deep in the drafting zone, something that I don't really tend to do very often is read biblical fiction novels, because it's not so much that I'm worried about the ideas in other people's novels making their way into my books, because I generally go into my books with like a very detailed outline that I've spent months outlining and preparing before I even begin the drafting process. It's more so that I'm just looking for a break when I read. Like when I'm very deep into drafting a book and I'm reading something, I want to read something that's very, very different to give my mind kind of a break. And also, you never know how a different genre is going to inspire you for the book that you're currently working on if you're a writer. And I want to preface that by saying, obviously, if you write historical fiction novels and you read science fiction, it might not inspire you to the extent that randomly in the middle of your historical romance, an alien will show up and just change everything. More so, it's just that reading other genres kind of keeps your brain fresh and thinking about new things and new ways of doing things, and not necessarily what specific plot points can you incorporate, but just different ideas that kind of keep your mind open to new possibilities. So I personally find that when I'm drafting, I like to read anything but biblical novels or anything but the genre that I'm currently working on, just to see how reading that book changes my experience or what I learned from that, maybe the author's craft or just something about, you know, the way they write it, or a scene or a message or a thread or something that they put into that book, how I can maybe apply that to my own books. Of course, I also read for pleasure. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books here to share with you, and I'm gonna try and keep it simple and try and keep it quick, but I will share as much as I can. The first 3 books on this list are the Hawthorne House series by Christiane Hunter, or the first 3 books in the Hawthorne House series. I'm still working on book 4, which is in fact My Secret Shame. I had the opportunity of meeting Christiane Hunter, the author of these books, way back in 2019 at Christian Fiction Readers Retreat, and at the time that I met with her and talked to her and got to know her, I discovered that I really liked her, but I was never going to read Regency era fiction, or so I thought. The first book in the series is called A Noble Masquerade. The second book is called An Elegant Facade. And the third book is called An Uncommon Courtship. I have loved this series so much. I have loved the writing style. After I met Christiane Hunter at CFRR, I did end up going on Amazon and buying quite a few of her books in different series, just like a handful of things here and there, because I wanted to support her and I really liked the way she talked, and I kind of thought to myself, ooh, I like this person and I like the way they talk and I like their personality. I think I'd like their books. Will I ever have time to read them? Probably not. But that is another discussion for another time, and not a question one asks at a reader's retreat. Reader's retreats are not for questioning if you have enough books. It is for questioning how many more books can you fit into your suitcase on the plane home. I did actually finally get around to reading them, and that was beginning with the first book, A Noble Masquerade, and I only actually technically ended up reading this because my friends Alicia Worthen and Audrey Bodine and I decided to kind of do like a buddy read where we would each read one of the other person's like favorite books or a book that meant something to them or had sentimental value of some kind, and Alicia picked this one as like her book of all books. I hunkered down and I procrastinated until the very last minute and then I read this book in like a day, and I mean, reading this book was such a joyous experience for me because I felt like I really got to know Alicia from fortheloveofchristianfiction.blogspot.com, and so much of her personality was just like clearly displayed. Like I could see why she loved this book so much, and that made me love this book so much. This one and An Uncommon Courtship are probably my two favorites in the series, but also they would be tied with this one so far of the three that I've read. In general, the things that I love about these books are the big family aspect of it, the family dynamic, and then also like the witty banter of the characters, and also people with tragic backstories. There's like three things I look for in a book, and it is family dynamics, witty banter, and tragic backstory. There is nothing that gets me hooked more than when someone has trauma and pain and devastation in their past, and they have to work through the next 350 some odd pages to break through the darkness and see the light. This book for me had all of the humor, all of the banter, all of the funny things. This book gave me trauma and it gave me tragedy, and it gave it to me in the best way possible. I loved this one, and this one just kind of made me happy. I would disclaim for the younger people watching this channel that this one is not necessarily for the younger crowd, but it is definitely a very interesting and thought-provoking read, and this one had for me the best like family scenes and brother sibling rivalry, not rivalry so much as just like teasing and camaraderie, and I'm someone who didn't grow up with like siblings around, so for me this is like, oh, I love sibling relationships so much. I love cousin relationships, I love family relationships, I love parent relationships, and this book had all of the good relationship drama, relationship scenes, relationship dynamics. I loved it so much. So if you are the kind of person who likes to read historical, or you like to read romance, or you like to read Regency, or just if you like to read good books, I'm gonna recommend these. The next book I wanted to share is one that I kind of picked up by chance with no clue who the author was, no clue really about anything backstory wise on the book. I just saw it in a store and I thought it looked interesting and it spoke to me, and that is One More River to Cross by Jane Kirkpatrick. And I kind of just really liked the cover. I liked the snow on the cover. I liked the wintry vibes of it, and I liked the historical aspect of it because I very rarely read contemporary. I'm not saying never, because we know what happens when I do that. But if I'm not reading biblical fiction, it's very highly likely that I'm going to read historical of some kind, just because I like to learn and imagine different eras and different times. And that's something about me that just does not change regardless of what I'm reading. I always like to learn something from from what I read. This book stuck out in my mind because it takes place in 1844, 2 years before the Donner Party. And I grew up in Northern California, grew up learning about the Donner Party and Sutter's Fort and Sacramento area, Gold Rush, 1849, all of those different kinds of things. Took a lot of field trips to like Coloma and Gold Country to see Sutter's Mill and the forts and the wagons and 1800s pioneer days and all of those kinds of things. So for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I know about that. I want to read this book because it just was an era that I was very familiar with growing up, going to school in Northern California and being in general education history classes in Northern California. I really wanted to read this book because I really just felt connected. All of the like places and settings that they talked about in the book, I knew what they were because I'd seen them in the modern day, but it was fun to get to read about them and imagine them in the actual time in which they were active and not museums. Yes, it is based off of a true story. It's historical fiction. It's told from like many different points of view. So that was something that for me personally was really hard to get used to, just because I'm not, I'm used to reading from like 1 or 2 points of view max. This story, because it's about an entire party of pioneers, shows like all the different paths they took and where they split and kind of what went wrong. And it's just a really good story. It's really an interesting style, or it was an interesting style for me personally to get used to, just because of all those POVs and all of that kind of stuff you have to keep straight in your head. If you like historical fiction and if you like stuff that's based off of true stories or based off of actual history and not just like set in a specific era of time, I would really recommend this book. It moved a little bit slow for me personally, but I really, really liked the history of it, and I felt like the end of it was just like one of those things that was like really made me admire kind of the pioneer spirit, or like the spirit of people to push through difficult circumstances, and I really liked it. And this is, once again, One More River to Cross by Jane Kirkpatrick from Revell. And the next 2 books I have, actually, technically I've only read one of them in the last year, but I did read the other one a while before that. I just don't remember when, but it was a while ago. I think around the time that it came out, but I'm including it because they're a series and they go together, and both of them are not biblical fiction, but they are biblical retellings. And those 2 books are The Peasant Queen and The Love of a Princess by Ashton Doro. If you guys are active on Instagram and in the Bookstagram community, then you might have heard of Ashton, but she goes by Life and Lit on Instagram, and these are her books, and they are biblical retellings. They are not biblical fiction in that they don't take place during biblical times, but they are like biblical stories reimagined if they took place in like a medieval princess, fairy tales and castles kind of world. And I like these books just because they're a little bit fun. To me, they read like YA, like young adult fiction. So they'd be good for like teens and teenagers, but every once in a while for me, I grew up in like the supreme era of YA and like the Hunger Games and Twilight and all of those books, and the Selection series and you know, all of the modern classics, as it were. And for me, every once in a while, I just kind of get like a hankering for a YA kind of book, which I guess what I mean by YA is maybe just like the voice and the style of it is very, I don't want to say younger, because younger is not the verbiage I'm looking for, but just fun and kind of lighter or more easy to read than something that's like really, really heavy and clearly more marketed as like adult fiction or women's fiction. To me, these books are just fun and light, and you know, they have interesting stories that maybe the stories and the plots themselves aren't necessarily light stories, but the way it's written feels very light and just easy to consume. And The Peasant Queen is a medieval era fiction novel inspired by the biblical story of Esther, although it is not like a word for word biblical fiction interpretation. It is like a loose retelling of the story of Esther and like the general concept. And I believe The Love of a Princess is inspired kind of by the Ruth story and Ruth and Naomi and that like bond of those 2 women and the story of Ruth and Boaz. And both of these books were just fun to read for me. They were good books where I could just kind of like sit back and not really think too hard about what I was reading and just kind of enjoy myself. And every once in a while, I just want to jump into a world with princesses in fancy dresses and jewels and diamonds and crowns and tiaras. Those two books are fun. Again, I would recommend them to a younger audience. If you are looking for those, or maybe you know someone, or you are maybe, I don't know, it's getting kind of late in the year, maybe you're doing some Christmas shopping and you've got a YA in your own life, a young adult in your own life, then maybe you could give them the gift of reading this year. It's always a good idea. And the third book is coming out soon. I will pop up a little image on here if I have the details. So those are some of the books that I've read in the past year and a half-ish that are not biblical fiction. Let me know, have you read any of these? Would you recommend them? If you have read other books like these, if you've read these and then you've read other books that are like similar and you think I would also enjoy those, please let me know, because I am once again in the thick of the drafting process for my next book, which will be book 3 in my Generations of Faith series. Again, more information on that in the description box below or on the screen right now for where you can learn more about all of the things. My name is Jenna Van Mourik. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!